Have you ever sat alone in a room that was too quiet, yet your mind felt louder than a crowded street? Marco knew that feeling well. He knew it in the early hours of morning, when the world outside his window still slept, but his thoughts refused to rest. At 24, Marco lived in a small village tucked between mountains that watched silently over the land. Stone houses lined narrow paths. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. It was a place where life moved slowly, measured by the rising sun and the evening bells. Yet inside Marco, nothing moved slowly. His mind was always rushing, pulling him backward into memories he could not change, then throwing him forward into futures that had not yet arrived. Some mornings he sat at the wooden table in his room with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. He would stare at the surface, watching a thin film form as the minutes passed. The coffee tasted bitter when he finally drank it, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were louder than the bitterness. He remembered old mistakes, words spoken too sharply, chances he never took, days he wasted thinking instead of living. At night, those memories lined up beside his bed like ghosts. They did not shout, they did not need to. Their silence was heavy enough. Sleep came late, if it came at all. When it did, it was shallow and restless. He woke with clenched jaws and tired eyes, as if he'd been running all night without moving an inch. People noticed the change in him. His mother saw it when he forgot to smile at small jokes. His friends saw it when his laughter came late, forced, or not at all. Even the old mirror in his room seemed to reflect a stranger, someone with heavier shoulders and a distant gaze. Marco was not sick, but he was not well either. His days were filled with motion, but no presence. He walked familiar roads without seeing them. He listened to people speak without hearing them. Life passed by like scenery outside a train window, always moving, never stopping. And the worst part was this: no matter how tired he felt, his mind refused to rest. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the mountains and painted the sky with quiet gold, Marco sat outside a small tea shop near the edge of the village. The wooden bench beneath him creaked softly. A warm breeze carried the scent of grass and distant wood smoke. Nearby, two elderly men spoke in low voices. They talked about a village high in the hills, a place where roads grew thinner and trees grew taller, a place where a man once lived a busy life in the city, helping broken minds find their way back to calm. They said he'd been a famous psychologist once. They said he left all of it behind. Now, he lived quietly among nature, giving advice only when asked, never rushing, never forcing. Marco listened without meaning to. The words settled into him slowly, like dust in still air. That night, for the first time in months, a small thought arrived that did not bring fear with it. Maybe peace was not something he had lost forever. Maybe it was something he had never learned how to hold. The next morning, Marco packed a small bag. He did not tell many people where he was going. He did not explain himself. He only felt a quiet pull inside his chest, a gentle but firm direction forward. The journey was long. Days passed as roads climbed higher and villages grew fewer. His legs ached. His shoulders burned beneath the weight of his bag. Some nights he slept beneath open skies, listening to the wind brush against tall grass. One afternoon, the path grew steep and rocky. Marco slipped, scraping his knee against the rough stones. He lay there in the dust, breathing hard, looking back at the way he came. It would be easy to return, to go back to his coffee and his worries, but he looked up at the silent mountain peaks, grit his teeth, and forced himself to stand. He kept walking. As he walked, his thoughts followed him. At first, they ran wild as always, but something strange began to happen. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. There were fewer voices, fewer noises. The mountains did not ask questions. They did not demand answers. They simply stood. When Marco finally reached the hill village, the sun was already leaning toward evening. The air felt cleaner there, lighter. Houses were spaced far apart, wrapped in vines and climbing plants. At the edge of the village stood a small house, half hidden by greenery. On its porch sat an old man. He did not move. His eyes were closed. His hands rested gently on his knees. His breathing was slow and even, like the tide coming in and out. Marco stopped a few steps away. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, in a voice softer than he intended, he spoke. "Grandfather, my mind is restless." The old man opened his eyes slowly. There was no surprise in them, no judgment, only warmth. "You have traveled far," the old man said, his voice calm and steady. "Sit." Marco sat. Words spilled from him then. About sleepless nights, about thoughts that never ended, about a heart that felt tired long before the body was ready to rest. The old man listened without interruption. When Marco finished, silence settled between them. Then the old man stood. "Come," he said gently, "I will give you a task." In the small yard behind the house, the old man filled a glass with water until it reached the very edge. The surface trembled with each movement. He placed it carefully in Marco's hands. "Walk to the edge of the village and return," he said, "but do not spill even one drop." Marco looked at the glass, then at the narrow path ahead. He nodded. The road was alive. Children ran past him, laughing. A dog barked sharply from behind a fence. Shopkeepers called out greetings. Footsteps echoed. Voices overlapped. But Marco did not look up. His eyes stayed on the water. Each step became deliberate. Each breath became slow. His hands steadied. Suddenly, a group of children ran past him, chasing a ball. One of them bumped his shoulder. Marco froze. The water swayed dangerously to the rim, almost spilling over. His heart hammered in his chest. He didn't breathe. He didn't look at the child. He waited, 1 second, 2 seconds, until the water stilled. Then he took the next step. The world blurred at the edges. There was only the glass, only the present moment, only now. When he returned, his arms ached, but the glass was still full. The old man smiled. "Tell me," he asked softly, "what did you see on the road?" Marco blinked. I don't know," he said. "I wasn't looking." The old man nodded. "And what did you hear?" Marco shook his head slowly. "I heard nothing." The old man's smile deepened. "For those moments," he said, "your mind was quiet." Marco felt something shift inside him. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently. "You were not in the past," the old man continued, "and you were not in the future. You were here." The words settled like warm light. For the first time in a long while, Marco felt his chest loosen. The old man placed a hand over his heart. "Peace is not found by running away from thoughts," he said. "It comes when we stop chasing them." That evening, as the sun dipped low and birds returned to their nests, Marco began his walk home. The path was the same, but he was not. He noticed the way the ground felt beneath his feet. He heard the wind in the trees. He breathed, and for once, he felt the breath arrive and leave. The storm inside him had not disappeared, But now he knew how to stand still within it. And that made all the difference, because peace, he learned, was never somewhere else. It was always here, waiting.